The most famous or infamous conquistador after Cortes was Francisco Pizarro, the invader of Peru and destroyer of the Inca Empire. Like Cortes, Pizarro was an immigrant from Spain. He served with Vasco Balboa, crossing the Isthmus of Panama, becoming the first Europeans to see the Pacific Ocean from the New World. Pizarro would serve in various positions, including earlier unsuccessful attempts to conquer Peru. The Inca had perhaps the largest empire in the world, from parts of Colombia to much of the way down Chile, many living above 10,000 feet. This was an innovative culture in a harsh land. The secret was the extensive trade system from the coast of Peru into the Andes, seafood from the ocean, beans, squash, and cotton around rivers, maize and the Andean grain quinoa from the foothills, potatoes in the heights, with llamas as pack animals. Each area had something to contribute. It was controlled from the center without markets or money. The shocking idea that people did what they were told. Dams, terraces, and irrigation canals were crucial. The population of the Inca may have been over 16 million. It was Pizarro's third attempt to conquer Peru in 1529 that was successful. He captured the Inca emperor. The emperor was held for ransom, which was paid. Pizarro executed him anyway. He took the Inca capital of Cusco and began the conquest. Pizarro would later be killed by one of his lieutenants. Apparently, conquistadors took backstabbing literally. Pizarro's conquest meant the start of a Spanish colony, but the complete conquest took another 40 years. Because of the diverse nature of the empire, the Inca allowed many areas to be controlled by local leaders. The conquest included not only Peru, but Chile and Colombia. Lima was founded as the political center of the new viceroyalty of Peru. The indigenous people were resettled, which can only be described as catastrophic, including a continuous decline in population, mainly from smallpox and measles. The Bolivian Cerro Rico, at 16,000 feet, was a mountain of silver, the richest ever found. The Inca had mined it to a limited extent. The Spaniards figured out how to mine vast quantities, requiring dams and tunnels to use in crushing plants. Indian villages were forced to supply the labor for the mines, adding up to 16,000 near slaves at a time. The Indians naturally feared the work, including climbing ladders over 800 feet and carrying 50-pound loads of ore. They were joined by African slaves. The local town of Potosi became one of the largest in the world. At the time, everything had to be imported. For the Indians, that mainly meant potatoes, corn, beer, and coca leaves. Pack trains of thousands of llamas brought in supplies and took out ore. The silver was gone by 1800, and Potosi turned into a near ghost town. Like Mexico, the culture drastically changed after the Spanish conquest, including the food. Some mostly indigenous dishes remained. A fish dish is called ceviche or Peruvian sushi, with fish and other seafood, but garnished with Old World lemon, onions, and cilantro. Then the yummy fried guinea pig and many potato dishes. Lomo saltado is fries, tomatoes, and rice. Most meat dishes were from Old World livestock, including beef and chicken. The foods can be considered the Peruvian fusion of traditional Spanish and other recipes. Potatoes grew wild in hundreds of varieties in Peru and Bolivia, then domesticated to grow high in the frigid Andes in poor soil, where other foods wouldn't grow. Potatoes yield lots of calories and vitamins, require little labor, and are easy to store. They were introduced into Europe before 1600 with amazing indifference. One reason was the plant was toxic except for the tuber. Even Queen Elizabeth I and her court fell victim to the poisons, and the poor potato relegated to Ireland. Eventually, the humble potato became an important food source, with many interesting stories to be told in later videos. The Amazon is gigantic, and Spaniards explored it with little enthusiasm. They found vast forests and primitive natives greeting them with arrows. In various places, sophisticated farming was done using earthworks, raised fields, water channels, including unique crops like manioc. These were only discovered recently, so the Spaniards saw little opportunity for riches or even farming. Brazil would become a Portuguese colony. The Pope split the New World between Spain and Portugal, with Portugal getting what became Brazil and almost all the Amazon. Conveniently, Pedro Cabral landed there in 1500. The Brazilian experience was unlike the rest of the Americas, but the Portuguese proved to be thuggish in their own way. What did they find? The vast Atlantic forest, whose only charm was to be cut down, ignoring the indigenous peoples living there as slash-and-burn farmers. They too became subject to spreading disease and slave raids. Portuguese colonies hugged the coast. The key product was Brazil wood, used to produce a reddish dye. Brazil was not Mexico. Colonists beginning in the 1530s landed in different spots, usually fighting indigenous groups. By mid-century, sugarcane was the most important export, relying on what became more than 2 million slaves. When sugar demand later declined, gold was discovered. Just like California 49ers, there was a gold rush. Coffee plantations prospered by the 18th century, and Brazil is now the world's largest producer. Not surprisingly, the food includes a combination of indigenous, European, and African dishes, mainly unpronounceable by me. Indigenous foods include manioc, cashews, and fruits. Potatoes came from Peru. The Portuguese brought livestock, adding additional meats and dairy, wheat, wine, and other vegetables. Coffee became the national drink. Feijoada is a traditional favorite, a stew of beans and either beef or pork. Other favorites include rice and beans, certain pastas, cheese bread, potato salads, Brazilian hot dogs, and more. Americo Vespucci claimed to land here in 1502. There were relatively few indigenous people in Argentina, but many of them would become famous as gauchos, riding Spanish horses and chasing Spanish cattle. Although coastal Argentina was next to coastal Brazil, it was not the Portuguese in Argentina. Spaniards came from Peru and Chile in the mid-16th century. Buenos Aires was settled for the second time in 1580. Argentina was known for the pampas, the wide open prairie with a nomadic population. Spanish conquistadors found no gold, but left cattle and horses, which thrived. This frontier led to the Argentine cowboy, the gaucho, herding half-wild cattle while spending most of their time in the saddle. Ranchers were mainly merchants, exchanging products like tobacco, alcohol, and sugar for carcasses and hides. The hides were the main export, while meat was mainly salted for later use as jerky or left to rot. Argentina became a major food exporter, especially after the steamship could bring live animals to Europe. That also meant better quality livestock, including fenced-off ranches. Later came sheep. The indigenous plus Spanish cultures suggest similar foods to Mexico or Peru, but no. There was crossover, but foods differed. Indigenous ingredients still included potatoes, manioc, peppers, tomatoes, and beans, then pizzas and pasta from Europe. Asado, which is an Argentinian barbecue, tops the list. Then empanadas, savory pastries with meat, cheese, and corn. Also fried and breaded meats, and sandwiches, salads, and vegetables. They have their own sweet tooth desserts like dulce de leche and ice cream shops. Wine and beer were the most appreciated drinks. That was a quick trip to South America and unique integrations of Europeans with the indigenous people and the introduction of slavery. Like Mexico, the countries were not early adopters of enforceable property rights, rule of law, or efficient capital markets, and continue to struggle as developing countries. We'll move on to the 16th century exploration of North America next time on Food History and Mystery.